Hello, everyone. My name is Apostle Eddin. Welcome to my channel. I know I've been away for a while, for about 2 weeks now. I've been sick. I still kind of am. So, this was supposed to be a video, but instead it's going to be a live stream. So, I'll try to make it short. So, hopefully, shorter than an hour. And the purpose of today's live stream is to go over some verses and show you how you can fix the Quran. Now, that seems like a monumental task, like many of you have already pointed out because I think there's a lot that can be fixed. So I'm going to go over some examples of verses that possibly can't be fixed and verses that can. And I'll show you with one concrete example how I can make the Quran better. And that's the Aladdin guarantee. So, like this video, like this live stream, and if by the end I don't improve the Quran with this one simple trick, you can dislike it. But that is my guarantee. So, yeah, and before we begin, today is the last day of Ramadan. In some places, it's already Eid. In some places, it will be Eid in a day. So, I'm glad Ramadan is over for those of you who wanted it to be over, and I hope you can celebrate Eid if you wish to do so. So, let's get into the topic. Um, oh, this is interesting. Before we get into the topic, Eric Allah says YouTube showed me a product named Aladdin. So I guess some ads are the algorithm is starting to target you with ads that have to do with Aladdin, but different Aladdin, I guess. So let's start by talking about the Quran. The Quran is supposed to be a perfect book. Unlike the Bible, unlike the Torah, they don't make these claims that they're perfect, that not one word is out of place. Many scholars and religious apologists and da'wah people and everyday Muslims even claim that not a single letter, not a single tashkil, not a single word, nothing is out of place in the Quran. You cannot do better than perfection. Not only that, but Allah has written the Quran on the preserved tablet, Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, since before creating the universe, since before creating time and space and existence. The Quran is eternal. The Quran is not just the book that we have today. It has existed before it was ever written down or uttered, before any of that. So that should give you an idea of how perfect it should be, meaning that Allah, or the author, Allah supposedly, had all the time in the world since before he created time to make sure that nothing was out of place, that he could not have done a better job at revealing a book than this, or at the very least, that no human being can do a better job, can fix anything in this book. That is my thesis statement, I suppose. And if I can point out a flaw in this book, which I'm very confident that I can, then that would prove that the author is either incompetent or a liar, or both. So we'll get to some examples of that. And I just noticed my cat is always here. Abu's always sleeping over here, and he doesn't seem to be bothered by my loud voice. So uh, give it a like if you like watching the cat sleeping in the background. Um, and I made a video before about the God's challenge or the Quran's challenge to bring a surah like it, bring a chapter like it. And that is supposed to prove to Muslims that the Quran is unmatched and cannot be replicated, cannot be bested ever. And to this day, you hear a lot of Muslims, those who speak Arabic and those who don't, usually don't, they keep repeating this claim that even all the Arab scholars and poets of the time, they couldn't replicate the Quran, they couldn't make something like it. And many people, they hear it and they weep and they join Islam right away, and all these exaggerated tales of that are supposed to give some credibility and authority to the Quran, that it is some kind of linguistic miracle. So I'm hyping it up a lot, to the point that if you see the issue that I see with it, then all of this goes away. Then act to face. How could this be miraculous when it has such a glaring problem? So there are a lot of things that could be fixed there, and we'll get to that in a second. So without further ado, actually, let's start with the first example. This is a surah, a short one, that I memorized since I was very young, and I said it a lot as a kid, just because it was a short surah. It was one of the first ones that I learned, so it was easy to get through prayer with these short surahs. And I don't know if it can be fixed, really, and you'll see why. But it's an example of something that could have been done better. So, hope you're with me. I know the font is a little small here, so we'll do our best to clarify. So this is Surah Al-Ma'un. It says, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. Have you seen the one who denies the deen, meaning religion or final judgment or judgment day? Deen doesn't specifically mean judgment day, but it's talking about, there are many meanings to the word deen. It could come from the word dain, meaning debt. So it has to do with judgment and the finality of judgment. So have you seen the one who denies religion or the final judgment? What about him? فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدْعُو الْيَتِيمَ. That is the one who repulses the orphan. That is the one who pushes away the orphan, who tells him to go away, I'm not going to help you. What does not believing in Islam or religion or the judgment day have to do with not liking orphans? Here's the first flaw right off the bat. Okay? Oh, check this out. Check this out. So the internet went crazy for a cat jumping on a sheikh's shoulder, but mine does it every time. And no one seems to care. Like it's not that big of a deal, guys. It's a cat. Anyway, yeah. This is the viral moment that everyone around the world was saying how incredible it is that a cat would jump on a sheikh while he's on an imam while he's praying, and it must have to do with the Quran and the beauty of the recitation of the Quran. Well, I'm just talking kufr right here, and the cat's jumping on me, so it has nothing to do with divinity. Anyway, going back to it. So, I just noticed you guys might only be seeing it in a small form. That's fine. Here, he's the star of the show. Say hello. Hello. All right, going back to the verses. So, you following so far? Have you heard of the guy who doesn't believe? He's the one who repulses the orphan. How did you make that inference? What does that have to do with this? This is as if this is slander, basically. Imagine if I said, and to make this clear, I'm giving an example for the sake of demonstration. I don't believe this. But imagine if I said, have you seen the guy who believes in Jannah and Jahannam? Have you seen the Muslim? That is the guy who what is it? Digs through his nose looking for gold. Like, what does that have to do with that? That is the guy who picks his nose. What does belief in the day of judgment have to do with being nice to orphans? This is slander. This is basically giving people the idea that those who don't believe, the others, they're bad people to the core. They won't even feed an orphan. They're bad people. They deserve torture. They deserve everything. So let's go back to, and this is why I don't know how I could fix this. Like, how do you fix these verses? Remove them completely? I don't think this one is fixable, but let's continue. So have you seen the guy who denies? That is the one who repulses the orphan and does not feed the poor, does not encourage feeding the poor. Okay, I don't see how you arrived at that conclusion. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. So woe to those who pray. There is no hypocrites here. This is an added word in English. These are two words. Woe to those who pray. لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. What? How did we get from talking about the disbeliever who's bad to orphans and a miser to those who pray? What is the connection here? Where's the beauty in this linguistic beauty that everyone talks about? This sounds like someone who's got schizophrenia, who can't even have a straight, coherent thought. He's talking about, imagine Alex Jones shouting this stuff. Have you heard of the guy who doesn't believe in the conspiracy theory? Well, that's the guy who doesn't donate on Christmas. And have you heard of the guy who goes to church? What are you talking about, man? Those who pray but are not mindful of their prayers. Sahun. So does that mean neglectful in the sense that they don't pray every single prayer, for example? They pray sometimes. Woe is to those people who pray sometimes, who aren't diligent with their prayers. And those who only show off, الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ. So they're praying to show off, or maybe they're showing off their money, or I don't know. God didn't put context in there. You're reading the same words I am. The Arabic isn't giving you any more context that I'm hiding from you. الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ. Those who only show off, وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ, and refuse to give the simplest aid. So we went from a kafir, right, who doesn't believe in the day of judgment, to someone who repulses the orphan and doesn't feed the people, to someone who prays, but only sometimes, but only to show off and doesn't feed the orphans. what are you talking about? Where is the beauty in this series of incoherent verses? And I read a comment here that I want to highlight. It's a very good point. 123 HP, and so on says, also, isn't adoption forbidden in Islam? Yes, it is. And I'll get to that in another video, but basically, Muhammad forbade adoption so he could marry his adopted son's wife, because had it been his actual son, had it been his biological son, he can't marry his son's wife, even if he divorced her. That would look extra bad. So Allah decreed, right? Allah conveniently decreed that adoption is no longer a thing in Islam. And apologists say, well, it's to preserve lineages and to know, who's the son of which guy, and not like it had to do with political reasons. It had to do with tribes and lineages and stuff like that, allegedly. So Muhammad talks shit about people who don't believe and are bad to orphans, and himself being an orphan, but he outlawed adoption. Make it make sense. Thanks for the super chat, Stop Scamming Man. I appreciate it. They say the New Testament's word for hell is Gehenna, Jahannam in Arabic. This was a place in Judea, and genetically modified skeptic visited in the video. I traveled to Jerusalem to face my fear of hell. Thank you for that. This is actually another video that I'm working on right now. 10 ways to get over your fear of hell. I specifically mentioned this, what Stop Scamming Man was saying. I haven't made the video yet. I'm working on it. But I want to give a shout out to Genetically Modified Skeptic, because he went to that valley of Gehenna. It used to be, if I remember correctly, a pit where they burned trash, or trash would catch fire every now and then. So it smelled bad, and people would throw all sorts of dead animals and corpses in there and stuff. And it was called Gehenna. And through a mistranslation or misunderstanding, it came to be incorporated into Christian lore as an actual place of eternal fire. And that's probably the origin of where Muhammad got it. But going back to the verses. So, you with me so far with the surah? How do you think we can fix this surah? I would love to see some suggestions in the comments, because the way I see it, I don't even know what the thesis of this is. So, is the author trying to say that people who pretend to pray but don't actually intend to pray are bad people? Or is he talking about how not believing in the day of judgment makes you not feed the orphans? So in the worldview of this person who wrote this, there is no good reason to feed the orphans unless God told you so, unless there's a day of judgment. Is that what he's trying to say? I'm not quite sure. Stop Scamming Man, thanks again for another super chat. Says, on Myth Vision last night, I asked Dr. Dennis McDonald what the New Testament's word for heaven means in Greek, and he said it simply means sky. That is not surprising. In Islam as well, the words for heaven and sky are very interchangeable. So I'm not surprised by that. So yeah. So that's the first surah dealt with. You can't really improve this because, one second, let me read this comment. Khalid says, the word an here is meaningless and should be replaced by fi to convey the intended meaning. Talk about lingual accuracy. Which word are you talking about? عن طعام المسكين. Where are you seeing the an? Maybe it's a different verse. الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون. Okay, I get what you mean. So he means to say it should be fi salatihim sahun, in their prayer they're neglectful. No, I think an works here. Sahun an salat, like they're distracted from prayer, perhaps. Yeah, that's not what I pick on it for. Yeah, no, I think that was fine. So let's get to the next example then. So here's an example. Let's read it together. Sorry, my cat is all over my keyboard right now. So this is a surah, what surah is this? Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 196. Complete the pilgrimage and minor pilgrimage for Allah, but if prevented from finishing, then offer whatever sacrificial animals you can afford, and do not shave your heads until the sacrificial animal reaches its destination. For those who don't know, at the end of Hajj, you're supposed to sacrifice an animal, and you're supposed to cut your hair to signify that it's over. So you do that only after the animal has reached its destination. Oh, what else? Here's the part that I think is noteworthy. Where'd it go? Hmm. لم يجد فصيام 3 أيام. Okay, so why am I not reading this? So those who can't, they should be fasting 3 days. They should be fasting 3 days and 7 after Hajj. تلك عشرة كاملة. These equal 10 in total. So God is saying, if you can't do these rituals, you're supposed to fast 3 days, then 7, which equals 10. Which I find to be interesting that God would use up some words to say 3 plus 7 equals 10. But keep that in mind. It's not the worst thing in the world. Sure, extra details don't hurt. But he went through the trouble of saying 3 plus 7 equals 10 in this example. But then getting to the end of the verse, where is it here? وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. I love how the verses end in each verse because it seems very random. So this verse is talking about what happens if you can't finish your Umrah or Hajj, and how you're supposed to do the rituals instead, and how you're supposed to fast or feed the needy if you can't finish it, and so on. And then God ends up the verse with saying, "And fear God and know that God is going to punish you severely." For what? For cutting their hair at the wrong time? For giving the food, for not giving enough food? It's like God can't wait but scare people at the end of every verse. What does the relevance of torture have to do with finishing what is supposed to be a relaxing and emotionally fulfilling and spiritually fulfilling ritual? Why do you have to end it with, and God's going to torture if you don't do it? The endings of these verses are often in Allah, blah blah blah. God is, and then insert two or three qualities of God or one quality of God. God is fear God because he tortures severely, or he punishes severely. Sam says, Aladdin, you don't get it. It's because he loves us. And oh man, I want to go on a little bit of a tangent. So about that whole love thing. So I made a video 20 minutes long where I was talking about my experience with the Islamic hell. And I got a ton of comments from Muslims saying, well, first of all, you're weak. That's not a problem with Islam that you're weak and you were scared of hell. That's a you problem. And secondly, you're an idiot because you didn't notice how God talks about hell, I don't know, 70 something times or 80 something times. I haven't checked the numbers because you'd have to look up every different wording of the word hell, but some 70 something times, and talks about heaven more times or equal amount of times. Don't you see that, it's not all about torture? In what sick, sad, unhealthy world, and I know what world it is because I come from it, is it okay to threaten someone with torture and physical aggression, and that's supposed to be canceled out by saying, but if you do good, I'll give you a bunch of houses and women and all you want in heaven. That doesn't cancel out the threats that you gave. Like, I've always given this example. My cat is sleeping right here, and I would never do this. But imagine if I slapped him around or just shouted at him, didn't even hurt him, but shouted at him, or like held up a vacuum. They're scared of vacuums. Held it up threateningly and started chasing him with it. But then I feed him at the end of the day. But then I like randomly terrorize him with fear out of nowhere. Like I instruct him to do a trick, and I'm like, if you don't listen to me, I'm gonna, scare you or beat you or something. Do you think the cat's gonna love me, or it's gonna be terrified of me all the time? So it's unhealthy for people who think that it's okay to love someone while threatening them, while telling them how much damage you can inflict on them. That's not a healthy way to have any sort of relationship, even with your slave creatures that you created, which is a whole other thing that I'm not enough of a therapist to qualified enough to unpack all the problems with Allah in that regard. No Name says, could you also address how they enamor and embellish the Quranic Arabic to the point it's made to sound like it's God's speech, the whole way it's presented to evoke an emotional response? Not sure exactly what you mean by that. Like the way that they sing it, you mean? The way that they pronounce it? I can tell you right here, we went through one surah together. You tell me if you think this is anything miraculous. I mean, sure, you don't understand the Arabic, maybe. Sure, you don't understand what the exact words are, but the English does a very good job of explaining, in this case, what the verses are about. So is there something magical about a schizophrenic man ranting about um, what was it? Disbelievers, orphans, and those who pray but don't pay attention, and then not feeding orphans again? Where's the magic in that? Um, let's see what else. Sounds pagan AF. Dude, I was thinking that to myself when I was doing Hajj and we're throwing stones at a big stone, you know, and I'm like, does nobody else see the irony in this? So other people had idols and stones that they prayed towards, and the prophets, like Prophet Ibrahim, excuse me, my throat. 1 second. Yeah, my throat's still messed up. I think it was Prophet Ibrahim who damaged the idols of a people while they were out celebrating their Eid. But we pray towards a big stone Kaaba with a special, extra special stone on the corner. We throw stones at other stones, and none of this is pagan. I just don't understand. Okay, let me read another few comments before I get to the. Oh my God, my throat again. Be right back. And I'm back. Okay, stop scamming, man. Another super chat. Thanks. Says, if you were God, would you burn people in hell forever for not worshiping you? Which sorts of people exactly would do exactly this if they were God? The sort of people who would do exactly this if they were God are people who are not well emotionally adjusted, or people who have learned that God would do this and this is perfectly normal and healthy behavior, and it's justified to some extent. They might feel that they'd never do this because they're not God, but who knows what they would do if they thought they were God. Or it's hard to trust someone who thinks that this is okay for God to do even. Oh, there's another chat. Oh my God. I said, oh my God, I'm Muslim again. Thank you, see, I appreciate it for the super chat. They say the most mysterious words are Alif Lam Mim. Nobody knows why Allah puts them in the Quran. Allah works in mysterious, magical ways. Yeah, there are huruf in the beginning of some of the verses. Alif Lam Mim, Yasin. And there are a lot of theories about do they add up together to some kind of word or sequence of words, but it's funny to see dawah men and apologists try to make linguistic miracles out of it somehow. Okay. Before I get to the other comments, oh God, I am still sick. I should not have done this today, but let's power through it. What is the next verse? Yes, bring it back up on the screen. Yeah, so in this verse, God specifies 7 plus 3 equals 10, and if you don't listen to me, don't forget God's punishment. Now let's get to another verse. How can we fix this verse? We think, I mean, I don't know. Maybe don't tell people. Remind them of your punishment when they're going to do Umrah, they're going to do Hajj, they're spending money and traveling to do this. Especially in the old days. And also, there's something interesting here that I didn't have time to look into it, so don't consider it a criticism, like a solid criticism or anything. But there's a clause here that says, where is it? These offerings are for those who do not live near the sacred house. And the way that is worded is ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَكُنْ أَهْلُهُ حَاضِرِي الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. I wish people could understand Arabic to see how confusing this is. This is for he or the one whose family isn't present in or near in al-Masjid al-Haram or near al-Masjid al-Haram. What does that even mean? Supposedly it means if your family, as in like your tribe, or if you don't live in that area, then the conditions apply to you. But then my question would be, how come if you live there, you're not supposed to adhere to these conditions? Like you don't have to fast or give the money if you miss it, but if you came from all the way far away, you have to pay even more money. I didn't really understand that part, and the wording of it in Arabic was pretty confusing. What does family have to do with it? What if someone lives there and their family doesn't? Like we're not just talking about a specific time and era where people's families lived there. Like this is 2023. Does that even apply anymore? But that's not important. How would I fix this verse? I would at least remove the The reminder that God is, fear God and he tortures a lot and all that kind of stuff. What does that add to the verse? What does that have to do anything with the verse? But this isn't even the big one that I wanted to criticize today. No, we're getting there. We're close. And for that one, I'm going to actually show you how I'm going to amend that verse to make it better. It's the one after this one. So this verse, verse 3350, it's talking about all the types of women that the Prophet can have intercourse with, or can have can marry, the women that are halal for him, lawful for him. What does this have to do with the rest of humanity? I don't know. Let's see. So I'll read it in English. O Prophet, we have made lawful for you your wives to whom you have paid their full dowries, as well as those bondwomen in your possession, your sex slaves, whom Allah has granted you. So you're allowed to be with your sex slaves. And you are allowed to marry the daughters of your paternal uncles and aunts. So you're allowed to marry your cousins, which I guess Allah didn't know that this can cause genetic illnesses. Allah didn't know that part. So if we were fixing the verse, we would remove that. Don't marry your cousins, right? That's something that really is really annoying about Islamic apologetics these days. They keep saying, look at these atheists. They have no moral framework. Without Islam, without religion, might as well sleep with your sister, and other incestuous things and descriptions that they give. Well, incest is allowed in their religion. They just define it differently. One second, I need to cough again. Oh boy. All right. We're back. Yeah, so this is a verse that came from Allah. Keep in mind, Allah wrote this before creating humans, before creating time, before creating space. Allah was sitting there thinking, so Muhammad's going to need some justification to tell the people around him why he has so many women. You know how all cults, or a lot of cults, would tend to have a leader that has a harem of women? Suspicious much? But he needs good reasons. So how am I going to write a verse to give him good reasoning to shut up the people around him? This is what Allah was thinking since before creating humanity. That's what we're supposed to believe, right? That's the narrative here. So Allah says, O Prophet, we have made lawful for you, blah, 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 your slaves, your cousins, daughters of your uncles, so cousins, who have immigrated with you, and also allowed for marriage, is a believing woman who offers herself to the Prophet without dowry. If he is interested in marrying her, this is exclusively for you. So this is interesting for many reasons. وامرأة مؤمنة إن وهبت نفسها للنبي إن أراد النبي أن يستنكحها. It's interesting because, so this is a clause that says any woman that goes up to the Prophet and says, hey, take me for free, no dowry, whatever. How is that any different than premarital relationships, except that you sign off on it? Like, supposedly the difference is in a marriage, the woman gets a dowry, and that's supposedly like an insurance policy basically for her in case the guy ever leaves her. But they're saying if women offer themselves to the cult leader, you can have her without any dowry, which is pretty much the same as premarital sex, but just call it marriage. But what's funny here is if you look at the way it's even translated correctly into English, a believing woman, if she offers herself to the Prophet. But here in this verse, he's already talking to the Prophet. O Prophet, we allow for you so and so and so. And then in the middle switches to, and a believing woman, if she offers herself to the Prophet. Why is he talking to the Prophet in third person? If the Prophet wants to marry her, only for you. So he says, O Prophet, these are all the women for you. But if a believing woman approaches the Prophet, if the Prophet wants to marry her, only for you. What kind of terrible writing is this? English, Arabic, any language. This is terrible writing. This is a mistake right here. This is a flaw. If I were to fix this verse, obviously I wouldn't have this verse in the book at all, where I'm telling the guy how to get laid. But because it's none of my concern. Like, the world is much bigger than telling one guy how many women he can have or how he can have them. But if I were to fix it just linguistically, I would say, وَامْرَأَةً مُؤْمِنَةً إِنْ وَهَبَتْ نَفْسَهَا لَكَ. in أردت أن تستنكحها, to you, if you would like to marry her, خالصة لك من دون المؤمنين, only for you, without the rest of the believers. That's how you fix it. Subhanallah, I fixed the verse. You see, this is how easy it is to find flaws in the Quran. And then it says, we know, wait, let me read it here. Exclusively for you. So not suspicious at all. God, right, before creating all of humanity in time and space, is telling a guy how to get laid, which women he can have, only for him. We know well what rulings we have ordained for the believers in relation to their wives and those bondwomen in their possession, their wives and sex slaves. As such, there would be no blame on you, and Allah is all forgiving, all merciful. Kana Allahu ghafurur rahima. What forgiveness, again, the signature in these verses is hilarious to me. Wa kana Allahu ghafurur rahima. Often two descriptors. Ghafur, rahim. Forgiving, merciful. What does forgiveness and mercy have to do with all the women that the Prophet can sleep with? What does that have to do with the rest of the verse? It's almost like these are filler words. If you focus on the last few words of each verse, very often you'll find Allah is insert two descriptors here. And then what? So that's another issue. Wait, I want to read some comments and then I'll get back to the get back to the final verse, which is the most important one, which I'm going to show you exactly how to fix. Herman says, starting a new religion seems to come with benefits. Yeah, they're called MLMs now. PTND says, why would the perfect all-knowing creator put marital law specific to his perfect messenger in his final and perfect message? I don't know about Allahu A'lam. God knows best. I've said this. I've seen this kind of comment before, not said it. How to fix Quran, step 1, take a Quran, step 2, burn it. I disagree not because I think it's so sacred and like it'll upset people. I think if it's your property, you could do whatever you want with it. That's not why I object to burning the Quran. I think by burning it, you'll make people cling onto it harder. You're sending the message that it's so dangerous that we have to get rid of it. And, there's no way that people can move past it without actually physically removing it. And I don't think that's effective, and I don't think that's ethical. I think that the best way is to critique it and dissect it and scratch out the words that you don't like in it. Just a little bit of foreshadowing here. That would be a lot better than just burning it, because burning it makes it seem as if it's such a dangerous tool of truth that people cannot stand to see. No, it's there. Let's just critique it instead. So yeah, I disagree with that. Nether Master 77 says, wake up, babe, new Quran patch dropped. If only, but that's the problem, right? The Quran is supposed to be final and perfect. There will be no more patches. So all of this is in vain because I can't fix the Quran. Allah won't allow me to. Let's see. What are the other comments? Mojo says, Fasal Aladdin, how many surahs in wudu and Surah Al-Fatiha? Yeah, I'd give an answer, but it's not appropriate for the live stream. Funny sex number. Sloth says, I don't speak Arabic, but I've heard the whole pronoun switching thing is an artistic device. Is it though? And here's the thing about art. Art is extremely subjective, right? So if you were to tell me that a piece of writing is perfect, and then you say, I know it doesn't follow the rules of grammar. I know it sounds disjointed. I know it sounds confused as hell, but that's an artistic choice. Then my answer could be, well, I don't like that art. I would rather it make more sense. Like, why are you switching pronouns in the middle? Oh, so now it's okay to switch pronouns? Okay, let's see. ET says, clear signs of it being the religion of Muhammad in disguise. There is no disguise about it being the religion of Muhammad. You pray for Muhammad more than God himself. Muhammad is the main figure in Islam. Nas says, can we appreciate that Allah gave his man a pass on adultery? Muhammad is literally allowing himself to commit zina. A married man, anyone else will be stoned to death for doing the same thing. Well, it's not seen as adultery if God says he can marry them. He can do it. But this is effectively it. A guy can have as many women as he wants for no or little dowry, and it's okay because God said so. Anyway, what else? Let's read a few more comments and then get to the next verse. Erica says, "Don't you picture a burning Quran in your video about hell?" Yeah, so that was I came up with that as I was making the thumbnail after I had already edited the video. It had nothing to do with burning the Quran itself, but the idea was hell is fire, right? And that seems very obvious. But I said hell is dead, and hell lived in the Quran. Hell just stemmed from the Quran. So it's kind of like it burnt itself almost. It burnt itself in confusion, and now I don't have that fear of hell anymore. But it wasn't actually about burning the physical copy of the Quran. PTND. وما أرى ربك إلا يسارع في هواك عائشة. So it's a hadith by Aisha that's going to become relevant later. I haven't pulled up the hadith itself, but this is what it says. Aisha says, "I only see your God rushing to fulfill your desires." She said that after this verse was revealed. She thought it was sus. Like, we're talking about a minor here, but she was smart enough to realize, hey, why is your God rushing to fulfill your desires? Why is he your wingman? Why is God trying to help you get laid all the time? And it's interesting that Aisha has stood up to the Prophet in a few of these instances, but obviously it wasn't consequential to the point that Muhammad would take it back or anything. But you'll see a better example of that in a little bit. But thanks for the super chat and for the hadith, BTND. All right, let's get to the next verse. Yeah, Yasmin says, all of these so-called rules are always in detriment to women. It's no coincidence. It's a religion by men for men. Now, this is the verse that I think is the most important here. This is the verse that we will fix together to some extent. The infamous wife-beating verse, right? Surah An-Nisa, verse 34. Here, I'll show you multiple translations because I think this one is a bit too what is it? Like sugar-coaty of a translation. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Men are the caretakers of women, as this tafsir says, the English one, Mustafa Khattab. But if you look at what it actually says, men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given them over each other. Caretakers, it says sometimes. Husbands should take good care of their wives. These are the apologetic translations, but men are in charge of women. This is the accurate one. The English translation by Pickthall. Men are in charge of women. Men are protectors and maintainers of women. There's a clear hierarchy here, and that's not even what I'm going to fix today. But men are caretakers of women, sure, as men have been provisioned by Allah over women and tasked with supporting them financially. And righteous women are devoutly obedient. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ. Are devoutly obedient and when alone protective of what Allah has entrusted them with. So they don't sleep with anyone else, is basically what this is saying. And if you sense ill conduct from your women, this is the part that's important. وَاللَّاتِ تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ. If you fear their ill conduct. This is not talking about a woman who's been sleeping around and you know it for sure and she's giving you the finger and running around making your life hell. If you fear her disobedience, then advise her. وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ. Where is it? Forsake them, meaning separate from them. If they persist, do not share their beds. Don't sleep with them. Separate from them. But if they still persist, then discipline them gently. This is absolute bullshit. This gently part is obviously, you see here between square brackets, that's English. Lightly, this is just Muslims trying to save face right here. This is where it's at right here. Beat them. Hit them. If you ever see gently, lightly, it's always in between brackets. It's always added after the fact. If you look at the word here, there's not even finally. Well means and. It doesn't mean fa. Strike them. Beat them. So if you fear ill conduct from your wife, beat her. So we're clear about that. The most charitable interpretations that are now trying to say face for Islam say, beat her gently. Don't leave a mark. Don't hit her face. looking at other hadiths that say if you beat your wife, don't hit her face, as if that's supposed to make it better. What they don't realize is when you beat a woman and don't leave marks and don't beat the face, that just makes it easier to continue beating her without people finding out. That doesn't make it better. Or saying, as a last resort, guys, he tried everything. He feared her disobedience and he tried everything. Get the fuck out of here. You just don't beat your wife. So this is, let's see. This is the verse here. Let me see if I can full screen this. So this is the verse. Yeah, وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ is here. You see that? How we can fix this, because the apologetics say that this word doesn't actually mean beat. It means separate from. So God says separate from them in bed, and if they don't listen, separate again, which is bullshit. What the verse says is if they don't listen, beat them. Listen to what? What have they done? It's not even clear. If you fear their disobedience, you can beat them. What we can do to fix this is just scratch out the word. There you go. وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَاكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا, and all that stuff. That doesn't even fix the rest of the verse, but it's a start. If you take out that part, all you're left with is separate from them in bed. Sure. You want to sleep on the couch? You want her to sleep on the couch if you're having marital disagreements? That's fine. That's okay. But you don't beat her. You just remove that word. And this is where I think I made the Quran better. I have just fixed something in the Quran, and I will take that challenge any day of the week. I will die on this hill. The apologetic point for this verse is that there's a lot of silly apologetics, like, well, you're supposed to beat lightly. Well, it's only in, tenuous circumstances. Well, it's only as a warning. All this bullshit. The one that they really cling on to is that the word doesn't mean beat. It wasn't meant as beat. But people who have bad intentions, bad people, are the ones who would interpret it that way. If that's the case, there are many women who have been beaten because their husbands think that they are doing the lawful thing that Allah has prescribed, and beating their wives is one of the steps for fearing their disobedience. So many men have committed this act of beating their wife against Allah's intention of telling them to do so, because Allah meant separate or meant something else. Well, I just fixed the verse. I made the verse better. I know better than Allah, the author of the Quran. I helped him communicate his intention, if that's truly his intention, better than he could do it. Am I better than Allah? Am I smarter than Allah? Am I greater than Allah? Obviously, I don't think I am greater than something that could have created the universe and made us all come to be, and I have more wisdom than it. But that's all hypothetical, isn't it? Because I just demonstrated that I'm greater, I'm better at understanding, at communicating than the author of this book. So I just fixed the Quran. Congratulations. Now, I'll give you some some background to when this verse came out and how Muhammad reacted to it, and how Allah, reacted to it through Muhammad. So you've seen how Allah has the presence of mind to say that 7 + 3 = 10. We've discussed that in a previous verse. So he's not short on words. It's not a problem with the word limit of the Quran. He could have added a different word in there or removed a word. So let's look at this hadith right here. The Prophet said, "La tadribu ima Allah." Do not beat the female slaves of Allah. I love how the wording of it is even very telling. Sure, everyone's a slave to Allah, but the women are not even referred to here as like, do not beat the Muslim women, do not beat women, do not beat your wives. It's do not beat Allah's slaves. It's supposed to be a way of honoring them by calling them Allah's slaves. Very submissive mentality, and that's what Islam is about, I suppose. Do not beat the female slaves of Allah. Then Umar came to the Prophet and said, "O Messenger of Allah, the women have become bold towards their husbands. So order the beating of them." And then the verse came and they were beaten. That's something that I say, and not a lot of people notice this. Umar was bossing around Muhammad in many of these instances. At least that's according to the hadith narrative that we have now. Omar would say something, and then conveniently a verse would come up about it. Or Omar would, he literally, Muhammad said, don't beat the women of Allah, the slaves of Allah. And then Omar said, oh, they're being too bold. Did Omar say that the women are beating their husbands or, sleeping around on them or killing them or killing their kids, or all the tenuous circumstances that apologists say qualify for beating your wife? No. Omar said they were being too bold. The women were empowered against their husbands. So their husbands feared their disobedience. And Muhammad said, well, conveniently, Allah in his eternal book that he has written since before space and time now is revealing that you can beat your wife. Let's continue the hadith, because what happens next is very telling. Then many women went around to the family of Muhammad. Excuse me for a sec. So many women went around to the family of Muhammad. The next day he said, last night 70 women came to the family of Muhammad. In a small town, 70 women, 70. 70 women came to the family of Muhammad, each woman complaining about her husband, beating her. You will not find that those are the best of you. Oh, fuck off. So Allah can say in clear, unambiguous terms, if you fear your wife's disobedience, you can beat her. But then Muhammad says, well, if you beat your wife, these aren't the top G's, guys. They're not the best. They're not up there on the high score list. He doesn't say those people are going to hell, or never beat your wife. That's not at all what I meant to say. Oh my God, no, astaghfirullah. He doesn't say any of that. He doesn't say everyone who beat his wife, bend over, I'm going to spank you. No, none of that. He just says, stop it, guys. You're not the best. What? And it's not even in the same book. It's not even that this came out as a verse saying, hey, what I said earlier, yeah, no, don't do the beating. No, it came out as a hadith. Muhammad said it casually, but it's not recorded in the Quran. It's in the hadith. It's not in the same, it's not going to reverberate as far in the Muslim Ummah as the Quran that all Muslims agree on, to some extent, at least the wording on these days. But Muhammad, all he could muster was, guys, no, that's not cool. They're not the best of you, the guys who beat their wives. And here's another one. And this is an interesting hadith. The Prophet forbade laughing at a person who passes wind, and then said, how does anyone... What does laughing at farts have to do with what's coming next? And why can't I... Okay, yeah, don't mock someone for farting, sure. But what if it's an inside joke between my friends and I, which is not the kind of humor that I have, but it's such a weird thing to take a position on. Like, you're supposed to be the guidance of morality, and you say, no fart jokes. But apparently, shaitan farting can make you miss prayer, but this is different. The Prophet said, forbade laughing at a person who passes wind, and said, how does any one of you beat his wife as he beats his stallion camel, and then he may embrace or sleep with her at the end of the day? And in another narration, and there are other versions of this hadith, as he beats his slave. So in another version, I haven't pulled it up now. I'll put it in the description, as all of these will be in the description. How does any one of you beat his wife like he beats his slave and then sleeps with her at the end of the day? So what is the moral here? He didn't say, do not beat your wife. Do not beat your slave. But he said, hey, it's strange how you beat your wife like a slave and then sleep with her. As if to say, hey, that's weird. That's it? That's a condemnation? A verse came down saying beat them, and then his condemnation is, guys, it's not great. Don't do it. So I hope that demonstrates that you can do better than the Quran. Now, wait, before we move on, I think this might be interesting. Let me first read some comments, and then I'll get to some more hadiths. So are we in agreement that I fixed this verse by removing one word? Consider this verse fixed. 434 officially fixed. I have done better than Allah. Congratulations, I've won the challenge. PTND says the number 7 is actually used a lot in Arabic. It's their version of shaitan. I don't know what this is. This is weird. This is weird. Hmm. Yeah, everyone's like, "Yep, fixed, abrogated, congrats." So, I have won the challenge. Okay, this is an interesting comment. Maz says, "This is the same God that made black holes and pulsars?" Sure. Yeah, so God created black holes, God created, the universe and expanding it and the Big Bang and all this kinda stuff that now Muslims are coming around to and saying God called it in the Quran. He did all that, but also he made sure to say who Muhammad can and cannot sleep with, that you can beat your wife, all this kinda stuff is in the same book, same God. Um, Talha says, "You're resorting to name calling of God and saying I'm defending him, like, no, I just want you to talk with some intelligence and not resort to schoolboy insults. God says to beat your women. I told him how to do better. I don't think there's any childishness there." And going back to the beginning of the live stream, God was shit talking anyone who doesn't believe in the day of judgment, saying that they don't feed the poor. What does any of that have to do with anything? But yeah, who's name calling here? Let me get to the last hadiths, because I was looking at one of the previous hadiths that I showed on screen, and I realized it's in the chapter of marriage. Which one was it? Yeah, look at the title of this, and it's very telling of the people that lived around the Prophet and after him. Chapter of Kitab al-Nikah, marriage. Chapter regarding hitting women. Bab fi darb al-nisa. They have a chapter on how to beat your women. So I thought, okay, what else is in the marriage chapter? What else is in Kitab al-Nikah? So let's go through it together. And let's just look at the Sahih ones. Oh man, I can already tell this one's going to be a disgusting one. I was with Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Uthman took him aside. Uthman said to him, "Would you like that I marry you to a young virgin who will remind you of how you were in the past?" Gross ass old grown women talking about young virgins. When Abdullah saw that he did not say anything to him apart from that, he gestured to me, so I came to him and said, "As you say, that the Messenger of Allah said, 'O young men, whoever among you can afford it, let him get married, for it is more effective in lowering the gaze and guarding one's chastity. Whoever cannot afford it, let him fast, for it will diminish his desire.'" Yeah, interesting. No, that's not the one that I wanted to read, but weird nonetheless. Let's see. There was one that I thought, yeah, this was very interesting. The Messenger disapproved of Uthman bin, what was the word? Let me read it in Arabic. Uthman bin Mad'un? Yeah, Mad'un. His desire to remain celibate. He disapproved of his desire to not get married. And if he had given him permission, we would have gotten ourselves castrated. It's so bizarre to me that Muhammad interferes so much with people's sex lives that he keeps promising them sex maidens in heaven, and they can buy or take over or trade sex slave in this life. And he tells them you have to get married, to the point that people or fast so that you have no sexual desires. Some people didn't want to. Some people wanted to be celibate, and they were just waiting for his command to castrate themselves. Isn't that a bit scary? That they said we would have gotten ourselves castrated if he gave us permission. And this is one of my central objections with religions here. Say in this case, Muhammad is the truth and he's the perfect guy and all that kind of stuff, and therefore them obeying him to the grave to the point of castration is fine. But what if he wasn't? Why are you using the same mechanism as cult leaders, as con men, as scammers, and you want blind devotion when your evidence is no more compelling than any other cult leader or scammer? Isn't that a problem that God expects devotion for just one of many stories where in the book he tells them how to beat their wives, and he expects that to be more convincing or divine than some other guy who's telling you the world's going to end a different way? Isn't that concerning that people were ready to castrate themselves had he given them permission? People were ready to kill themselves and cut their organs off just if he says so. What was it? Okay, no, there was another hadith, but I can't find it at the moment. Yeah, okay, so this is something that I want to talk about for a second. A man asked the Prophet, "What are the rights of the woman over her husband?" He said that he should feed her as he feeds himself and clothe her as he clothes himself. He should not strike her on the face nor disfigure her, and he should not abandon her except in the house as a form of discipline. So he doesn't say he shouldn't beat her. He says, don't hit the face or disfigure her. Don't leave a permanent mark, and don't hit the face. Muhammad never said, don't beat your wife. Muhammad never said beating your wife is a bad thing that should never be done. He just wants it done in a specific way if it's necessary. And I just want to make that crystal clear. This book was never here to tell people to not beat their wives. This is just a new apologetic point. And I fixed this book by removing the wife beating part of the verse. And that's something that I want to talk about for a second. You hear this a lot, that Islam gave women rights and the Muslim woman has rights over her husband. And so-called rights are food and water and shelter, which like if you're the one who owns her basically, and at those times especially, maybe they couldn't work, they weren't allowed to work. If a man chooses, if a Muslim man says, I don't want my wife to work, Islamically he's in the right. Like, she can't really do anything to oppose that. It's his right to tell her where to go or where not to go. And at the end of the day, it's a blackmailing technique, because Muslims say, well, the woman has rights over her husband. He should provide financially for her. But that is her leash. If a woman has no lifeline, she doesn't have a job of her own, or she is just provided for by her husband, then what can she do aside from be with her husband? And that's especially the case for the prophets of the wives. So, the wives of the Prophet. They were not allowed to get remarried. No one, like, Muslims were told, don't touch them. They cannot be remarried even if the Prophet dies. Or if he doesn't die and they separate, those are untouchable women. So how could they leave him if no one is allowed to marry them after that? So is that really a right over them, to give them food and water and clothes? Or is it how you keep them hostage? That's my take on that. Let's see if there was anything else that I wanted to point out. So this was a little bit of a clickbaity title, because I said I was going to fix the Quran, but like I demonstrated, you can't fix the Quran. There's too much. Like, am I just going to fix the things that I find to be linguistically not great, or to clarify the meaning of certain words? Maybe that's possible, but can you really fix the underlying message of the Quran? No, because not only would I have to remove the wife beating part out of the verse, then I would have to start addressing, why is the verse talking to the men about fearing disobedience of the women? Where's the part about, if the guy's an asshole, if the guy marries another woman without your permission, which it's Islamically allowed. A man can get married again as long as he can afford it, or like afford to be fair between them, or whatever that means. Why is there nothing over there? Isn't it always more often the case than not that the men are the ones who should, like, if you give the power to the men, they're going to abuse it. Isn't it true that women are more rational when it comes to emotions, when it comes to talking about emotions, especially in that part of the world? Why would you give license to the men to beat and discipline the women, and have nothing in there about how do you deal with a marital disagreement if the man is in the wrong? The verse says nothing about that. So I can't fix the verse simply by removing the wife beating. I would have to rewrite the entire verse. I would have to write a whole Quran instead. So that I'm not going to do, but I've made the verse better. So I'll read a few more comments before I end the live stream, because like I said, I want it to be under an hour, and it's pretty much an hour right now. Sarah says, exactly, it's a leash, not a privilege, to have no way of supporting themselves. Allied Atheists Alliance says, she can't even leave the house with a male's permission and keeping a watch on her. Without a male's permission, a woman can't even have her like brother or parents over if the husband says no. Estiel says, since you speak Arabic, I think you should make a detailed video explaining in detail why that word doesn't mean beat. Well, I've made a bunch of dissecting apologetics videos about it with what's his face and the other guy, Jonathan Brown and Omar Suleiman, I think. Yeah, I've made some live streams about it, but hopefully someday I can make a video about it. If you just look at the tafsir, they all say beat, beat, beat. To say that it doesn't mean beat, okay, my answer to that is always like what I just showed. if you can replace it with a word instead of فَضْرِبُوهُنَّ أو وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ وَاتْرُكُوهُنَّ, leave them, separate from them. If you can replace it with a word that unambiguously does not mean beat, you could do better than Allah. So I have done better than Allah by replacing and removing that word. Even if truly that word could mean something else and not just beat, it's still a bad word to use in that situation, because there are women who are beaten because of that verse, because of Allah's ineptitude, the author's ineptitude. If anyone disagrees, I would love to know why. Like, I would love to see in the comments after the video is over, not just the live chat. And please do give this video a like, because I'd like more people to see this and give me their opinion. What is wrong about what I said about how I just improved the Quran? I fixed it. I made it better. If you disagree, please do tell me why. Aladdin, before you go, Mas says, you should challenge us to make verses better than you can. No, I challenge you to leave this verse as it is and tell me that it's better than my version. Tell me that the verse with the word that could mean beat, according to apologists, is better than just removing it. And I think I'm just going to make this the thumbnail of the video, because that's how you improve the Quran, by removing from it. And yeah, I suppose that is the end of the video on the 1 hour mark. Thank you everyone for watching today, and stay tuned because I've got more videos in the works, and I'll see you next week. As always, think critically and think for yourselves.